Fury of Heaven and Hell, Chapter 3, School Troubles Again. It turns out when just about every teacher at Signal Academy remembers a certain blonde with dual shotgun gauntlets, they tend to be a tad lenient on the kid who already had a massive reputation for being a badass. Even more so when they found out he was related to probably one of their least favorite students. I'm just saying, I was stuck for weapon ideas and decided my sister could use some backup in her department, Demon said in an almost annoyed tone, mainly because he was being scolded by just about every teacher at the school for waking the students and making it a much more eventful night than it should have been. Plus, the blacksmith, Lennegrass, said I could use it. The teachers around him all adopted a look of, you must be bullshitting me, for some reason, although he honestly couldn't notice thanks to the near hundreds of kids that were behind them. There were 4 teachers, 3 of them being normal teachers that he honestly couldn't care less about, while the last was the gym teacher, who reminded him of Neo, because he could imagine them laughing maniacally while brutally murdering someone for the fun of it. Or that's the vibe she gave off anyways. The blacksmith is a mute and he's deaf. I highly doubt that, one of the teachers put in, slightly explaining the reason for their looks. It was Demon's turn to give the "you're shitting me" look, as he distinctly remembered having a nice chat while he forged the parts for his gauntlets. Really? He asked, guessing that it wouldn't have been the first time he'd seen an illusionary semblance, and it could all just have been a trick. They nodded their heads. Then the gym teacher turned back to the kids and decided they'd have enough fun. All right, back to your classrooms or you'll be running laps, she shouted, producing a collective groan that was silenced when they all met her death stare. Demon shuffled back to the top of one of the teachers. Demon shuffled over to one of the teachers, the one that seemed to be the liveliest of the group, given that he was wearing ridiculously colorful clothing, which wasn't all that new on Remnant, honestly. Although he was the only one who acted like they weren't condemning him to the depths of hell. What's her problem? He whispered, startling the teacher a bit, but still getting a response. She's annoyed because you made her lose a massive bet she placed on you fighting against Yuki, he explained, patting him on the back as he did. Don't take it personally, but she also absolutely hated having Yang as a student as well. Why does everyone here seem to hate Yang as a student? You seriously don't know? He exclaimed, grabbing him and ushering over him to a rather large trophy cabinet. Without saying anything, he pointed to one of the trophies, and even stopped to read it. Yang Xiaolong, presented on her day of graduation. Award presented for single-handedly collecting the largest amount of detentions ever recorded at this school, complimentary of Miss Palakinstev. So I take it that at least 90% of her detentions were during gym, Demon asked, getting a nod from the teacher. She was fine in all her other classes, other than almost never doing her homework and arriving late half the time. She was fine, although it was in gym where she seemingly did most of her handiwork. On her first day here, she had already racked up 3 for disrupting class, and it just kept piling on after that. Although it's always funny to see her get riled up when we talk about Yang. So what was the worst thing she ever did to this school? Demon questioned, getting a bit curious as to how few disruption notices would get a teacher that pissed. She set fire to the entire school overall 5 times, the teacher nonchalantly replied, still looking at the massive trophy case. Demon looked behind him and saw said oval, whistling as he tried to imagine Yang setting it on fire. It wasn't very hard. Well, I better get home before Miss Douche comes back and decides to kick my ass. Miss Douche, eh? Came a very annoyed voice from behind them, both boys turning to see said dim teacher standing there, not looking happy at all. Well, it was nice knowing you, the teacher said, preparing for the worst. Only, Demon already had an escape plan. He just saluted the teacher and fired a shot from his gauntlet up into the air, not waiting until he received a tongue lashing from the teacher before he activated his semblance and teleported it up to the shot. Then gave Yang's preferred method of transportation a go. He switched the shots to close combat mode and fired the gauntlets behind him, being shot through the air all the way across campus and landing in a thud in front of the blacksmith shop. Seeing the teachers running across campus at lightning speed, he ran inside to say thanks to Lenny Grass before leaving. "Hey, old fool, I gotta go before I get turned into paste, so thanks for the help," he shouted as he ran through, briefly seeing the blacksmith put on a large chunk of metal into a forge. "I knew you'd be around soon. Don't waste my time if you're just going to leave," he replied, working the bellows of the forge as the metal began to glow a burning amber. Demon paused in his run and turned around to the blacksmith with a newly bemused look. "Why the hell is literally everyone saying that you're mutant deaf, yet you're clearly talking to me?" The blacksmith turned around and smiled, taking the massive block of molten steel from the forge with his bare hands. "Do not believe everything you hear and see, Hawk, for not all is as it seems in life. The sooner you realize that, the better." Demon stood there for a few seconds before having to snap out of it to grab a massive ammo box that was thrown his way by the blacksmith. "Your mother pays well, so I figured I'd be nice to her kid. So don't go breaking those over anything anytime soon." Demon took a moment to process it before he gave a thumbs up to the blacksmith, busting through a side door and running to the front of the school again, passing the very flustered secretary and quickly going through the automatic doors to the street outside. He quickly jumped over to Cerberus as it was parked right outside, wrapping a rope around the ammo box to tie it down before turning the key and gunning the engine, speeding off in a wheelie while the gym teacher yelled at him furiously from behind. Demon smiling and laughing as he turned the corner and turned onto the highway back to his HQ. It was a while before he made it back to the warehouse, ensuring that he kept below the speed limit so he didn't have to hack the police again, rolling up to the White Fang's guards he had set up to stop anyone getting in. They looked like they were going to stop him, before they saw who he was, of course. Then they moved casually aside and opened the door. What greeted him inside was a warehouse he could only describe as ordered chaos. In front of him were both White Fang grunts and some of Junior's men, all moving various supplies and weapons to and fro across the warehouse. Boxes of all shapes and sizes being moved. It was mainly supplies that he'd need for his business venture, although he noted that most of it comprised of the 2 new weapon shipments that he was getting from his newest partner. The lieutenant and Vanessa were both overseeing the movement of supplies, the two working surprisingly well together, considering that the lieutenant hated humans. Demon guessed that he didn't have anything against robots. His 2 titans were still in Vale. Vanessa and Nikolai were both recalled from the front lines and were now helping around in the warehouse during the final rush, 2 days before his plan could go into action. He got away from the massive titan as she saw him and he returned it as he walked over to the nearest box, opening it and inspecting the contents. Inside were 30 brand new R101C carbines, all fitted for dust round firing capabilities, as well as around 100 clips sitting nestled neatly next to them. He had given the schematics to the largest weapons producer in Vale, albeit a small company compared to those in Atlas, placing an order for enough of the weapons to supply the entire White Fang in Vale. The rifles, in his opinion, were far superior to the looted rifles they found on the way into the White Fang's hands, and, with his plan, he'd need as much firepower as he could get. He put the cover back on the box and went over to where the rest of his friends were, and was greeted to the sight of a massive game of poker. "Royal flush, assholes," shouted Josh over the din of everything, a massive groan following from the rest of the group, and a large pile of winnings being hoarded by said pilot. Ying was giving Josh a massive death stare that could rival Weiss's, Kira and Marcus weren't exactly fazed by it, but still looked annoyed, while Tempest was sharpening the blades on Hellraisers with a sadistic glint in his eyes aimed at Josh. Demon wasn't noticed by any of the players, but felt a small weight on his right shoulder, looking up to see Neo peacefully sitting there with a smirk. He had honestly been surprised when she'd elected to sit on his shoulder whenever he was at the base, but he honestly couldn't care less. She weighed less than a rock, in his opinion, and he would sometimes even miss when she teleported off, as he didn't notice the change in his step. "Heyo, anything new on Blake?" he asked, as he walked over to his personal pod, putting his weapons onto their respective stands and taking off his gauntlets, putting them onto his weapon bench, beginning to work on the inner mechanisms to make the loading smoother. He had gotten Neo to do some undercover work into the travel between kingdoms to try and figure out where Blake headed off to, knowing it was less likely that she stayed in Vale. Neo took out her scroll and spent a few seconds tapping a response, reaching down with the device so that Demon could see it. Captain of a ship said he'd seen a cat faunus that looked like her head into Menagerie. Said she'd take down a sea dragon along the way. "Okay then. Looks like after we hit Atlas, we're off to Menagerie. Well, tomorrow's the big day, so can you go check up on all the files and make sure we've got everything?" She nodded and disappeared off his shoulder. Demon, hearing the alarmed shouts of White Fang grunts as she teleported in front of them, and no doubt caused them to crap their pants. He set aside his gauntlets and locked the door leading to his pod, activating the barrier that would prevent Neo from using her semblance. It was a rather nifty device that Marcus had developed himself, although he had linked it up to Nikolai's nuclear core so that he didn't have to run out of power thanks to the ridiculous power usage. He had no idea how it worked. Typical excuse. Although he did know how it ran off the principle that the ice dust crystals inside were dispersed in a way similar to the Titan drop shield's work. Although it creates a barrier to semblances only, stopping them from working. The only reason he didn't try to figure out a way to carry it for personal use is A, because of the massive power usage, and B, because it weighed a crap ton. Literally a ton. Just to produce a 3x3 meter shield. He put his helmet and the rest of his armor on the stand and laid in a small bed, running a hand through his hair to try and work out the tangling and blood that were stuck bubbling together and messing up. He lay there for some time, just thinking about the last couple of months and the crazy shit that happened to both his companion and himself. He laid there for some time, just thinking about the last couple of months and the crazy shit that had happened to both his companions and himself, closing his eyes and trying to get some much-needed rest, until he felt a pair of eyes watching him. He faked a yawn, moving his arms up to his head, then reached under his pillow and whipped out a combat knife, aiming at where he felt the intruder was, to see his mother again, with her mask at her hip. "Is it really too much to ask for you to not aim a weapon at me every time I see you?" "Well, if you actually knocked, it would help," he playfully shouted back, placing the knife back underneath his bunk and sitting up. His mother sitting beside him and giving him a quick hug. She looked over the weapon bench and smiled briefly. "My daughter is definitely going to be annoyed when she sees those. Congratulations on making it out of Beacon alive." "Yeah, you do know Yang's playing poker next door. I could grab her and talk it out. That machine over there stops her semblance from activating, and I'm sure I could get her to calm down. Come to think of it, how did you even get in here?" "The ceiling," she replied, nonchalantly, pointing to the air duct in the ceiling. "Plus, I don't exactly want to see her. She doesn't deserve it until her father explains what happened." "What do you mean, explain what happened?" Demon asked, not exactly figuring out what tone she had as she stared into the distance, as if reminiscing something. "In due time. I shall talk to my daughter, and tell you exactly what I mean. But for now, I must ask you, what exactly are you doing? Not even my sources can find out what you have in those boxes out there." This time, it was Demon's turn to smile evilly, laying back and taking out his knife again. Nothing much. Only enough R101Cs to stock an army and enough supplies to keep said army in the field for 3 months. Raven seemed to cringe inwardly at the words, something that wasn't missed by Demon, although he had to admit she did hide it well. And where would you be getting an army from? My little secret. Not to be pushy or anything, but why exactly did you come here? I don't think it would exactly be for a nice motherly chat. My idiot brother has gotten himself into trouble. I want to keep tabs on you in case she went off after you as well. Wait. Send one after me. What happened to Crow? One of my enemies sent an assassin to take the Red Reaper, and he took it upon himself to protect her. I came here to see if they had sent an assassin after you. I haven't seen anyone so far. What would they look like? It depends, she replied, scratching her chin for a couple of moments before continuing. Look for a large brute with short brown hair and a beard. He'll be wearing an olive green coat with black gear underneath, and he won't appear to have a weapon on him. Just know that he doesn't need one to kill you. Got it. Look for an 8-foot tall dude who looks olive green and shoot the crap out of him before he manhandles my ass and sends me to hell. Seems simple enough. Raven sighed at his explanation, but nodded anyways, looking as though she was about to say something, only for the door to begin to open. She didn't have to ask as a knife flew out of Demon's hand and hit the switch on the semblance blocker, disabling it, allowing her to jump through her portal a moment later. Demon used his own semblance to teleport over to his helmet, practically slamming it onto his face as Yang walked in. I knew you were back. Why didn't you say anything? She scolded, walking over and punching him in the arm, before her eyes settled on the 2 additions to his arsenal. My, what do we have here? Demon carefully began shuffling back towards the door as Yang's eyes began fluttering between lilac and red, slowly turning to him and giving him a dark smile. He feebly tried to give a smile back until he realized he had a helmet on, then made a mad dash for the door. Back in the poker game, the others all heard a massive commotion and looked over to the officers' quarters, seeing Demon practically dive out, barely making it a meter before he was tripped and slowly dragged back in, trying and failing to grab onto something that would save him. Then the door slammed behind him, and they began to hear something resembling a Beowulf being kicked like a hacky sack, which wouldn't have been too far from the truth. Tempest groaned as he knew he couldn't really let Yang break Demon, so he reluctantly stood up and went over to the door, opening it, and then being thrown back as Demon was thrown into him like a rag doll, both of them hitting the opposite wall with a massive thunk. Yang came out of the room, her eyes now blazing red while her hair glowed gold, Demon's new gauntlets in hand. Law and order, you asshole. Don't do this without asking me, she warned in a surprisingly calm voice, throwing the weapons at him and hitting his groin, making Tempest cringe as he felt the impact. Demon just gave up and used the last of his efforts to roll off Tempest, face planting on the floor and muttering a couple of words to himself. Law and order. Nice names. Tempest looked up to Yang and gave a thumbs up, mostly because he wasn't dead. But then again, she didn't look like she was going to kill him, so it was a double positive. She calmed down a bit and went over, helping him up before they both went over to the poker game and rejoined like nothing had happened. Just as they were about to start, Tempest gave practically the best idea he had had in a while. Hey, why don't we do a bet for who gets to pour the ice-cold water on him in the morning? A resounding chuckle of approval came from everyone, but not before Demon threw a knife and hit Tempest in the back of the head with the hilt. Asshole, muttered the nearly unconscious pilot before he felt himself fall asleep. He'd deal with the problems tomorrow. So no, I'm not dead. I had to take a break from fan fiction. It was becoming, I don't know, I wasn't as in a good place. I don't think anyone was last year, but 2021, starting off strong, getting back into it. I'm going to finish this story. Now, I am working and in college, so I can't tell you a consistent schedule. I'm also doing my writing, my fan fiction, model painting, my love life. I got a lot going on. But I'll try and squeeze these in whenever I can. Thank you for sticking with me. Have a great 2021.